I'm Elisa Parker. We're broadcasting from the 17th Annual Wild and Scenic Film Festival. It is the largest environmental film fest of its kind in the United States. What a gift that it's here in our community in Nevada City and Grass Valley, California. And we've had thousands of everyday extraordinary, like I call them environmental action heroes, who come to participate in this festival. Extraordinary people like Tommy Caldwell, who is our special guest today. He is an professional, extraordinary rock climber. There's a new film called The Dawn Wall, and you have a new book as well.
Yeah, the book's about 2 years old at this point, but yeah,
it's not new.
Yeah, it's called The Push. Yeah, which the film is like kind of loosely based on the book, actually.
Right. Well,
yeah.
It's so great to have you here with us, Tommy.
Yeah, great to be here.
It's your first time at Wild and Scenic.
Yes, it is.
It's hard to imagine because you've been featured in so many different films and print. It's like we would, yeah. Well, anyway, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, no, wonderful to be here. I've been wanting to check this one out for a few years, so.
Yeah, and so you're also part of the CLIF athletes group as well.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be one of the CLIF athletes.
So I watched The Dawn Wall the other night with one of my younger daughters, and I have to tell you, first, if you haven't seen the film, you need to check it out. It's an extraordinary story of both your determination to chart a new path up El Capitan. And can you expand a little bit about your experience with El Capitan, especially on the Dawn Wall, and why it was so significant for you to climb that?
Yeah, so El Cap is sort of center stage for the type of climbing I'm into, big wall free climbing specifically. And I really got kind of hooked on going to Yosemite every year and climbing there when I was like 16 years old or something. And really now I'm 40 and I've been going there for several months a year that whole time. So I went and repeated all the existing routes on the wall for many, many years.
How many routes are there?
So there's 100 different named rock climbs up the face of El Cap, about 100. Most of them are done by aid though, which means you're like pounding pitons in the crack and attaching aiders and kind of climbing the equipment. Free climbing has really been, people have been doing it for about 20 years, but really it's getting popular just in the last handful of years. And so there's, I think, 12 different free routes on El Cap, something like that.
And you charted what, like, were there 5 different ones?
Yeah, I did the first ascent of about 5 of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then tell us about the Dawn Wall.
So the Dawn Wall for me became like the next step. I had done all the existing ones, and this was like a bigger, steeper section of wall. To really understand, you almost have to be into the nuances of it, but it was like one of those things in my sport where it was like, this is potentially possible, but we're not sure. So being the one who could go and figure that out and actually discover that it was impossible was my chance to be an explorer. It was like it was my chance to do something in my sport of climbing that hadn't been done, and really a style. Like, we ended up being on the wall for 19 days. We worked on it for 7 years. So it was just sort of grander scale for this type of climbing.
Right. Tell everyone about what that means, like working on it for 7 years, like the process. It's not what someone might think like, hey, I'm going to go climb the Dawn Wall and El Capitan. Like, there's a lot of thought and process that goes into that. Yeah.
So sort of on the smallest level, it's figuring out the exact moves, the body movement. What you're grabbing onto is, these tiny little edges that are like the size of the edge of a penny or something like that.
It's amazing. I just want to even see your fingers too, Tommy. Like,
yeah, I just came from the climbing gym. So
you did? Oh my gosh, that's right. You did there was a climbing session at the Gold Crush climbing gym. Yeah. So your fingers are going to be a little, like, obviously flatter and like, there's superhuman powers that you have, Tommy, and being able to hang on to these
they're
little...
certainly beat up fingers, yeah. Put them through a lot of abuse over the years.
We'll talk about your fingers, too, in just a minute as well. But so people look at the Dawn Wall. I mean, it looks like just this sheer cliff.
Yeah, and I think that's what appealed to me, because from afar, it doesn't look like it should be possible. But I had climbed so much on that wall that I was the one person that knew that, sometimes on these walls that even from 20 feet away, they look completely blank. If you get your face right up close, you can find these little edges, and then if you train just right, you can learn how to move from one to the next. And so that 7 years was sort of doing that on this 3,000 foot scale, like memorizing where every finger went on every hold and exactly how you held your hips. And it was really choreographing it and practicing it much the way you would like a dance routine or something like that.
How do you chart that? Do you write it down? Do you I'm just getting specific here, but do you actually like when you're making those discoveries, do you like, oh, I'm going to make a note of that and write it in my like charting the Dawn Wall
Some of it's so like the details are about muscle memory. They're so microscopic that you can write some of them down. You can kind of write these benchmarks down to help remind you. You can definitely write the gear down, like the protection you're using. We would write all that down, but it's really just an insane amount of memorization.
And so for over 7 years, Tommy was charting this. Yeah. And so tell us about then that moment. It became really an international moment when you and your partner, is it Kevin, who was a boulderer. Like Kevin he'd never climbed El Capitan before. But so tell us a little about Kevin and then that moment when you're like, okay, we're ready. How did you know when you're ready to?
Yeah, so Kevin, I'll talk to Kevin first. I was up there trying to find this route all by myself. I had this kind of dream, but it was pretty lonely. There really weren't any other candidates out there. Like I was climbing in a way that basically nobody else was interested in. Then Kevin contacted me one day, and he had been in the climbing news. I'd written a few articles about this climb, so he knew about it through that. And he said that he wanted to come check it out. And my thought was like, oh, he's unqualified. He hasn't been through any of the experience that kind of prepares you for this sort of climb. But I was lonely. I was like, sure, he'll come up and I'll get a belayer for a few days or whatever. And then he turned out to get very obsessed about it, much the way I had. And then his bouldering skill it really helped me figure out that it was possible. Like he was so strong from his bouldering that he could do these sections of the climb much better than I could. So it really ended up being a combination of his kind of like scientific and his good bouldering strength combined with my sort of overall knowledge of the entire thing. And so, yeah, we became partners and 6 years together working on it. And then I think I said this, but 19 days.
19 days. So describe to us what that feels like to be living on the side of a wall. How high up was your like base camp area too, where you have this tent it's like a tent suspended on the side of El Capitan? How high up are you, first of all? In that space?
I mean, generally you just move your camp as you climb.
You keep moving up. That's a lot to move up.
Yeah,
that's a lot of gear.
Well, on this climb, we figured out though that we could climb the first big section.
Okay.
Like the first 1,100 feet on day one, and then so we camped there for the entirety of our whole 19 days because all the hardest sections of climbing were all within like 400 feet of that. So we would just return back to our base camp every night.
How high was that?
That was 1,100 feet.
1,100 feet. So you're living on the side of this for 19 days. Describe, and you'll have to see the film too to experience that as well. But just describe for our listeners and viewers, like what is that experience like to live on the side of this sheer cliff? And I should also mention you guys climb during the winter time. So it's cold.
Yeah. I mean, it's a crazy experience.
It's crazy, Tommy. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah, it's like superhuman.
I mean, the wall itself is super sheer.
Right.
There's no horizontal surfaces at all. So we're in our portaledges, which are like
these
portaledges, these hanging cots. That's what we live in. That's what we sleep in. That's what we cook in. We have one that's our base camp. We also carry another one with us that we belay from. So those become our homes. It's beautiful up there in the winter. You know, the valley, Yosemite Valley is really quiet. You get this, there's a little bit of moisture usually there. So these ice these like ice will melt off the top of the wall and kind of drip down and create these gumball sized droplets that kind of like float in the updraft. And it's just shockingly beautiful. But it's also harsh. It's windy. It's really sunny all the time up there. And so we climb, and for our skin not to wear out, it had to be as cold as possible. So we climbed in December and January at night primarily. So it was oftentimes, 20 degrees or something, 20, 30 degrees was sort of the optimal conditions for having the right kind of friction, but suboptimal for life in general.
Totally. And I know you're a really determined individual. I mean, how many moments were there when you were climbing when you thought, what am I doing? Like, were there ever any moments like when I know Kevin had his moments for sure that they showcase in the film, The Dawn Wall, but any moments you're like, what are we doing here? Like,
Constantly, yeah.
Really?
Totally.
Okay.
I mean, throughout the 7 years, like, we wondered if we were totally insane. My dad, everybody in our community is like, what are those guys doing? Just like going back there, beating their heads. It's fruitless. Like, nobody had ever worked on something this long, so we doubted it constantly. And then for me on that final 19-day push, though, I was like ready. I like knew it could happen. Kevin wasn't quite so ready, so that's one of the reasons it blew up in the media, is because it became this whole thing. It was like, is Tommy gonna just have Kevin support him to the top, or they're gonna persevere and do it together? And it was like people were drawing all these analogies to like life in general, which we didn't even
you didn't know, right?
Yeah, we
and
didn't even intend that to happen.
So at one point too, you just like check your phone, so you're not, because Tommy, like you're doing interviews while you're in your is it the portage? Portaledge. Okay,
yeah.
So you're on the phone doing these interviews, and at one point though, you're just like, you're done with that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a solar panel, we had our phones, you get amazing cell phone access up there, so we started getting all these emails, and pretty early on, we're like, we can't let this in. So we did a couple interviews. I think we did NPR and the New York Times. Yeah.
Right.
And then we would do Instagram updates each day. But other than that, we just like blocked it all out.
Right, which is important. And so there was that pivotal point in the film, if Kevin's going to make it. So then now you have spectators on the Yosemite Valley floor who are like watching you guys. Mm-hmm. Like it became this whole thing.
Yeah, it was live streamed on TV. Yeah, and
no pressure.
It just all happened like weirdly. Like when we started, it was just me and Kevin. And then we're making a documentary film too. So our buddy Brett Lowell was with us.
What do you think it is about that? Just us as human beings that love like this. I know it reminds me of like the hero's journey story, because there is a lot more to your story too that we're going to talk about a little bit.
I mean, I think the New York Times did a really good job of like making people care. Also, we just happened upon this format to view things to view a sporting event that's really engaging. I think the fact that it took 19 days gave a lot of time for people's excitement to build. It's not like watching a 4-hour football game or something. It's like watching a whole season, or like the Olympics or something. You come back every day and you just wonder. And so we didn't plan any of that. It just happened. Yeah, but it was cool and weird all at the same time.
Yeah. So going back a little bit, you became, so your dad did rock climbing, and he would take you out in these crazy situations. Like there was a moment when you're like traversing on this like tightrope wire, to get across from one point to another. Like he pushed you. Your dad pushed you. He's had a big influence.
Yeah, he was a mountain guide and kind of an adventurer at heart. He's the kind of guy that like getting scared was very exciting to him, and so he wanted me to experience that
and
too.
You were more of like a reserved kid, it sounds like, growing up a little bit.
I mean, I definitely like, my dad was my hero. I definitely I drank all the Kool-Aid that he could feed me, but I wasn't gregarious like him. Like I was pretty shy. I was socially awkward. I was so I was kind of this weird, like shy socially, but like pretty adventurous.
Right. So when is it? You're 14 years old, and there's this world-renowned climbing event, like up this, it was a building or something, right? Were you 14 or 16?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to remember.
It was a young age. And
it was 14, I believe. And that was the infancy of climbing competitions. Like there weren't climbing gyms so much back then. So they just, they just glued holes to the side of a building, and so that was my first climbing competition.
And so Tommy then succeeds, and you win this competition, and people are like, who's this guy? Yeah,
because there weren't really competitions so much before that, and then I show up at one of these early competitions,
this teenage kid,
end up winning. I have no idea that I'm even a good climber at this point, but it's the first time that I can kind of like compare myself to other people, or more importantly, that other people can compare me to other people, and I won the competition. So suddenly I'm sort of a professional climber, when like 2 weeks before that, I didn't even know that was a profession.
Right. Yeah. That must have been like, what kind of impact did that even have on just your everyday life?
I mean, it made me super focused, that's for sure, because had this opportunity. I was like awkward. I was kind of bad at everything else. I was really uncoordinated, except I was a good climber. So it was like all of a sudden I was like, wow, I'm good at climbing. This is super exciting. So from that day on, like climbing, my focus just narrowed completely.
Was in that. And what a gift to be able to discover that at a younger age.
Yeah.
Right? Because some people seek that for their whole lives.
Yeah.
To find that one thing that they're really good at. So then, so moving forward then, some of the things I know that had an impact on why you were really focused on climbing the Don Wall. Two significant things. I mean, one in Kyrgyzstan, right? I know you've told this story a lot, but for folks who might not have heard it before, you were out climbing with a team and then were basically like held hostage
it was
from the rebels.
Yeah, it was my first big international climbing expedition to southwest Kyrgyzstan. We got mixed up in a political war, basically, kidnapped by the Islamic movement.
Did you guys know about that before you went out there? Like, did you have any idea around like the political stuff?
There was a little bit of political turmoil the year before, but it was a place that climbers went to all the time, and we were pretty young and we were adventurous, and we're like, well, you can't just avoid all risk.
Right.
And so we went, and so did a bunch of other climbing teams that year, by the way. And we just, we weighed the risks. We decided we would climb in this dead-end valley where we were sure that nobody would come up there. But we were wrong.
Right. And you're going to have to watch the movie The Don Wall to find out like everything that happens within that journey. I'm going to have them watch the film.
Yeah. Informative.
Yeah. Informative. Very informative.
Yeah. But it was a life-changing event, really, that led to a lot of
so
things.
much so. I mean, there was a lot of trauma and intensity, too.
Yeah.
That really, I think, it seems like it really supported and influenced your focus on the Don Wall. Like just...
Yeah. Like Kyrgyzstan traumatized me, but like also illuminated a lot of things and helped me kind of figure out who I was as a person, as all, hardship does.
Right. Yeah. And when you're in those, like I've been speaking with so many, amazing individuals who've been, when faced with that challenge that they never thought they would in their lives, they discover what they're capable of in that moment. Which you pretty much did. And I know that you've been living that out as you've been climbing and in these really unusual, sometimes dangerous situations.
Yeah, it's interesting. It made me realize that I was capable of more, but it made me more than anything really curious about like kind of the limit.
Really?
Yeah.
So would you say... Do you see, are there limits? Would you,
yeah, there's certainly limits.
There's some things you couldn't do, but you push them to discover if it's possible.
Yeah, and I wasn't so much that way before Kyrgyzstan.
Is there anything on your horizon right now where you're thinking, like, is there something I could push the limits on that? Maybe something that hasn't been done?
I mean, not in the same way, I would say, because I think you have to become well-versed in something before you're willing to push the limits. And the Don Wall was kind of like as far as I would want to take that type of climbing.
Right, and now you have 2 kids, right? So your wife's like, Tommy, that's a lot. That would be a big toll.
Yeah. But so I think I'm like becoming a beginner again in a lot of ways. Like actually, I'm getting involved in environmental activism and kind of putting more of my focus into that.
Is there anything in particular in that's you're leaning towards?
Like kind of following the vision of Patagonia in a lot of ways. For the last 18 months or so, there was a lot of public lands work that I was doing, going to Washington, D.C., doing lobbying
Speaking
trips.
to Congress.
Yeah,
and
now
lobbying.
it's more
That's
like,
cool.
now it's more like, climate issues. But like I said, I'm just a beginner.
You're just a beginner in that. I'm sure you're going to excel in that too, Tommy, because you're very determined and focused. So another significant thing that happened, which I think is okay to share without watching the movie, is you cut off your primary finger.
Yep.
That you would use for
index finger.
Left index finger. Are you left-handed or right-handed?
Left-handed.
Oh my, yeah, I am too. That would be tricky then. Yeah. And climbing, because you're you're really...
Yeah, no, climbing, the fingers are very important. So, I think that's why my book and possibly this movie has resonated with a lot of people, because there are, I've figured out a way to somehow take these pretty serious things in my life and turn them into fuel.
Yeah, because in that point you were told you'll never be able to climb again.
Yeah. And
what's important to that too is you climbed the Don Wall without that finger.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, it is true. That is the true part. You have to check out the Don Wall. So how old are your kids now?
2 and 5. So little girl Ingrid, she's 2. My son Fitz is 5.
Are you like your dad, or do you have similar ideas of how are you going to take him to some high wire area and
I think how I would like to be is to take what my dad did in terms of like infusing me with excitement for the outdoors and adventure, and be like that, but maybe tone it down a little bit, because he almost killed me a lot of times.
Yeah, that's tough.
When I was young.
That's not what you're aiming to do with your children.
No, but I do find myself like, when I was in Yosemite a few months ago, my son was like, "Oh, I want to go up and do a big route, Dad." And I was like, "Oh yeah," I got so excited about that. And so we went up. We did like a 500-foot route, and he got totally traumatized, like he was scared up there. And I just find myself just being just like my father was. I get excited. I'm like, "Oh, this like his fear is gonna help prepare him for the world." And so yeah.
So what have been, and you have your book now too that talks about this experience. What have been some of your biggest shifts now? Like after you completed the Dawn Wall, which most people thought wasn't possible, and what was like a big shift for you in that, and maybe how you're even showing up in your life in general? Like
how did the Dawn Wall change my life? Well, it certainly derailed my climbing for the last 40
Oh my gosh, right? Because Tommy's like speaking, you have the
I'm writing
book,
books
the
and movies. I'm doing tons of events.
You're like a media mogul now.
I'm certainly I never wanted to be a public person in any capacity.
That's the fascinating part, right?
And the Dawn Wall definitely made that happen in a way that's felt both challenging, exciting, and somewhat frustrating at times, because I'm always like, I just want to go climbing. Which I don't get to do as much these days, but I still hold out hope it'll happen again. And there's so many, I mean, like that's the biggest first world problem in the world. Like I have so many amazing opportunities these days, and I meet so many great people, and like life is extraordinary, but sometimes I do wish I got to climb more.
Right. For folks who are watching or listening to this and have an inkling, like maybe they should step out of their comfort zone and try something, like what is usually your advice and suggestions to them about why it's so important to like sometimes cross that line?
I mean, I feel so privileged to live in this community of very, very like impassioned, vibrant people. And I think the idea of boldness is what creates that willingness to step outside. And really all that takes is being inspired by other people. And that's why the community is so full of that people, because you're just like finding inspiration everywhere you go. There's film festivals all over the place. And so just embed yourself in that community, find the people that inspire you, and try and follow them.
Why is it so important for folks to participate in festivals like Wild and Scenic?
Because they're incredibly community building things. It's what creates it creates like-minded people, which is going to be what it takes to save the planet, I think. I mean, especially the outdoor oriented people know know nature so well, and you fall in love with it, and therefore you want to protect it.
Tommy, keep us posted on your updates and your next challenge, and that could even be around environmental action. So let us know what we can do and how we can be supportive. And that was so great to connect with you, and thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks for just who you are, and it's extraordinary. And I also know that's it's an element that exists in all of us. So it's really important, though, that you are out here, that you are doing it, that you are telling your story, because it really encourages all of us to know we can show up and be our best and push our boundaries. So I appreciate you, and thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Wonderful to be here.
The film is called The Dawn Wall. Check it out. Tommy is doing book signings as well for his book. I'm Elisa Parker. It is the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, the largest film fest of its kind in the United States. Such an honor to connect with extraordinary people like Tommy, and you can come on down here and connect with folks like him. We'll be hearing other stories like Tommy's. Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if we're going to hear other stories like yours. but they will. Probably not.
There's
probably
a plethora of inspiring
but
stories.
there are other inspiring stories. Thanks so much.